Hello, and thank you all for joining in this presentation of Avalon, the early years. This is the first in a series, a three-part series of the history of Avalon. My name is Bill Mengel. I am a part-time interpreter working at the History Center in Avalon, located at 215 39th Street in Avalon. So what we want to start with is first Avalon in the early years. Leeming Beach, Tatum's Beach, Sea Isle, 7 Mile Beach, and finally Avalon. These were all names given to this beautiful island. The view of the island would be looking, this view of the island would be looking west towards the mainland. Notice the many large trees, some of these as high as 40 feet. This photo would have been taken most likely from the George Tatum Mansion Observatory, which I'll speak about in a couple minutes. Here we see large sand dunes, mountains of sand, often 30 or more feet high in continuous ridges for miles from the north to the south end of the island. Back then you would find many bayberry bushes and cedar trees throughout the island. What we have here is a chronological list of the owners of the island. This goes back to 1722. West Jersey Society, a 6-member group out of London, sold to a gentleman by the name of Aaron Leeming for 79 pounds, 10 shillings, about 380 American dollars, in 1722, the entire island of over 2,700 acres. The Leeming family would end up owning this island for 132 years. 1854 comes around, the Leeming family would then sell the island to a gentleman by the name of Joseph Silver for $12,000. Mr. Silver would then, for some uncertain reason, would sell the island to a gentleman by the name of Henry Tatum just 7 months later for $5,500, a loss of almost $7,000. It's still no answer to this. Henry Tatum was the owner of several homes and interest in hotels in Cape May, and was very politically involved in local government. Henry Tatum would then, about a year later, sell in 1856 to his older brother George, who was a very successful lead manufacturing business in Philadelphia, for $15,000, a nice healthy profit of $10,000 in just 1 year's turnaround time. George Tatum would end up owning Sea Island, as he referred to it, and his children for 31 years. This is another view of what Avalon looked like early on, with cedar and oak trees and acres of plants and holly bushes. Also many lakes and waterways. This photo was most likely taken from the top of George Tatum's farmhouse observatory from the southwest side of 22nd Street. This would be looking northwest and shows the boating canal, which I'm identifying here. This would be the boating canal that George Tatum dredged using the existing Letts Creek route to Graven's Thoroughfare, which went on to Ingram's Thoroughfare, which was in the west. Mr. Tatum enjoyed fishing very much, and this made the canal very close and convenient to his home for him and his invited guests to his mansion. George Tatum also had owned about 25 head of cattle and roughly 300 head of sheep and lambs, which he would let them roam, graze freely for years on the island. You can see one of the cattle pictured here in the center of the photo. This photo was from about 1889, when there was still some cattle that they needed to get off the island. The island was great for grazing cattle, in that there was no need for any fencing, as the island was surrounded on all sides by water and marshland. Here we have a freshwater lake that would have been somewhere around 14th Street. There are accounts of winter residents going to the lake and cutting out chunks of ice to store in made-up storage huts cut into the dunes. It was said that this ice, believe it or not, would last until the spring and sometimes early summer. This is the old Leeming Estate, or Old Limerick as it was referred to, most likely built around 1780 and located on the southeast side of 2nd Avenue on the south corner of 31st Street. It was used later on in the 19th century temporarily as a boarding house and also as a real estate office. Sometime after 1856 was George Tatum's farmhouse. The house was shipped to the island on a barge. Mr. Tatum would end up owning 7 Mile Island, as I said before, for about 31 years. He absolutely loved and enjoyed spending many days and summers here with his family. He would often invite church groups onto the island to enjoy the pristine beaches and even build a beach house for the visitors to change into their beach outfits. He would also employ a tenant farmer to take care of his livestock and his property. Here we have one of those groups pictured at a picnic outing at Tatum's Beach, just enjoying a welcome change from the mainland environment for the day. Sadly, though, after 31 years, Mr. Tatum's health was failing him, and with no interest from either his 2 sons or his younger brother in taking on ownership of the island, he and his wife decided to sell this summer retreat. He would end up selling the Sea Island, as he referred to it, to 2 entrepreneurs out of Philadelphia. The 2 gentlemen you see pictured here are certainly people of importance to the creation and development of 7 Mile Island, now Avalon. Joseph Wells on the left was president, on your left, was president of 7 Mile Beach Company, and Frank Siddall were both successful businessmen from Philadelphia. They would offer to purchase the island from George Tatum, and on April 1st, 1887, for the amount of $125,000, $25,000 down, another $25,000 due in 6 months, and the balance to be paid in 5 years, George Tatum would sell the island. Now, one of the first of many items on Joseph Wells' plans for developing the island was to prepare the north end of the island for both streets and avenues. And for that, he would need to fill and level the many creeks and waterways that Mother Nature had provided previously. He would then need to hire a surveyor to lay out the most efficient street plan. While doing all this, he would also start negotiations with the West Jersey Railroad, a subsidiary of the Pennsylvania Railroad, for continuing train service onto 7 Mile Island. Keep in mind now that West Jersey Railroad was also providing service into Ludlam's Island, which was called back then, but is now Sea Isle. Pictured here are some of the directors and stockholders of 7 Mile Beach Company, who often held their meetings on the island, at first in the Tatum Mansion, as pictured before, but then soon after, in 1889, in the newly built Hotel Avalon, which I'll be showing you pictures of shortly. To start with, though, in the early development of 7 Mile Beach Company, they would have to employ hundreds of mostly Italian and German immigrants, who some had just come to America for the first time. Now keep in mind, this time Ellis Island was not open yet. So many new immigrants coming from America would be processed out of Philadelphia, which was closer to Jersey than New York, so they could bring them there quicker. Those employed would use just wheelbarrows to start to drag down the dunes to fill the waterway ponds, marshes, and meadows. Hundreds of wheelbarrows would be used, which make for a very long day. Here's another photo. Most of this ground development and filling the waterways was supervised in the beginning by Joseph Wells himself. They would have at least, as I said, wheelbarrows and 20 wagons all day long going back and forth from the high dunes going west. Hundreds of men from dawn to dusk for about $1 a day per man. Now, back then, the really only way to get onto the island was by boat, as roadways and the railroad were not in existence. So the boat or some type of marine vessel. The gentleman you see at the bow of this boat is George Rummel with his signature hat. Mr. Rummel will become an important developer on the island within a couple of years. The railroad, the right-of-way. The right-of-way and train route onto the island would pretty much be dictated by the West Jersey Railroad. Keep in mind at this time, during the height of the Industrial Revolution, the railroad was king. The negotiation was important to 7 Mile Beach Company, as was its decision for the layout of the streets on the island. It would be almost a year later, in 1888, before the final deed was granted. most likely over the final decisions for the train station locations and lot size, which needed to be negotiated. The cost to the railroad, $0. The only dollars that they would put out was for track materials and for the labor. 7 Mile Beach Company would provide the right-of-way. Mr. Wells' time frame was as soon as possible. Wells already had paid out $25,000 cash, and in another 25 was due in 6 months. This was the proposed route that was decided by both West Jersey Railroad and 7 Mile Beach Company for the train route that would not only serve Sea Isle and Avalon, but also later on Stone Harbor. Although it was West Jersey Railroad's intention to continue its line on into the then Anglesey, now North Wildwood, this planned extension into Hereford Inlet would never come to fruition. And if you see here, you'll see the West Jersey Railroad coming down, as this was the proposed extension that never happened. Street planning and layout. While negotiations with the railroad were underway with Joseph Wells, as I said, he had brought the surveyors in to start the task of laying out the avenues and the streets. This map shows the planned route for the West Jersey Railroad to enter Avalon from the north end of the island, building a train trestle, or as they refer to as a swing bridge, across Townsend's Inlet. And this would be Townsend's Inlet right here, between Sea Isle and Avalon. It also shows the railroad crossing, the Beech Creek waterway, which is right here. However, to alleviate building another bridge, which would be here, over the Beech Creek, this would be filled in with dredging material from a widening of the creek at Ingram's Thoroughfare. Now here's Ingram's Thoroughfare, and this is where they're going to widen this and dredge this out to the westernmost portion of Beech Creek. Notice the ebb tide, or the outgoing flow from Ingram's Thoroughfare. And also from the 80-foot wide Beech Creek, right here. This flow actually caused several problems. So a planned canal was dredged, as I said, from the thoroughfare to connect to that westernmost part or loop of the creek. The dredge material was used. The dredge material from the creation of this creek was used to fill in the inlet of the creek from its mouth back to the railroad right-of-way. This would eventually create a more direct flow in the succeeding years and erode what they refer to as the Camel's Hump, this section right here of the island. You will notice the new waterway canal of Beech Creek after the dredging of the tidal pond, which will be eventually filled in by the widening of this Beech Creek. Notice the Beech Creek section in this right here is now filled in where the railroad trestle will cross. This will alleviate the additional trestle needed for the railroad to cross over Beech Creek. And a more direct flow will eventually erode this hump right here, as we can see from the next slide. So this is what that creation and filling of Beech Creek and the tidal pond created. This actually is a map filed with the 7 Mile Beach Company, by the 7 Mile Beach Company on July 31st, 1905. So it took a few years, but you see now where they've erased that Camel's Hump here as they referred to it. The West Jersey Railroad and 7 Mile Beach Company entered into an agreement to bring the railroad over Townsend's Inlet and into the most northern part of 7 Mile Island. The trestle bridge build will be supervised by Joseph Wells along with West Jersey Railroad engineer. West Jersey Railroad will enter the island and head southeast to 2nd Avenue, where it will run south down the length of the island. They will require 120 feet of right-of-way in anticipation of dual tracking. which will really never happen. Only a single track will be provided. Here we have a photo of one of the first steps in the construction of the swing bridge from Townsend's Inlet into the north end of 7 Mile Island. This A-shaped bridge here, also referred to as a gallows bridge, because it is similar to a gallows. This here, the apparatus you see to the left of that, is really only just a pile driver used to drive pilings in for the trestle. Notice the cables which are connected to the edge of the bridge span. These cables will actually pull this section of the bridge to the left to allow a marine vessel to go through. And this was actually operated by hand, not by electric motor, by almost like the size of a ship captain's wheel that the bridge tender would end up using to open and close the bridge. This type of bridge would be used where only a short span or opening was required for marine vessels. Eventually, there would be 2 bridges constructed on the last and final railroad trestle to Avalon and Towns Inlet. One at 88th Street and Townsend's Inlet in Sea Isle End, and the other at Avalon. You could see, if you want to, actually see how this bridge operates if you were to go to Google and type in New Jersey swing bridge, and you'll actually see it in operation. On July 14, 1888, the first train rumbled across the inlet bridge. This is another look at the bridge, the swing bridge, also referred to by the West Jersey Railroad as just bridge number 53. Notice the platform here, as I'm pointing out on this lower right of the photo. This was used for just maintenance or access to the bridge. Keep in mind the train would only travel about 5 to 15 miles an hour when going over the trestle. Another thing is, because there was no way to turn the train around after entering Avalon due to the lack of what is known in railroad terms as a Y, and that's spelled W-Y-E, the train would need to back the engine all the way to Sea Isle, which did have a Y, to turn the engine around in the opposite direction. Here we have, this is the only problem with this type of bridge or trestle was that it was constructed with wood pilings, and also to create a better water flow, they would alleviate cross bridges, which they would use on a normal bridge. As I said, this was the shortest, and it was about 1,250 feet straight direction layout from the south end of Sea Isle to Townsend's Inlet to the very northern tip of Avalon, and at this time also called Leeming's Beach. What was not factored into the design by West Jersey Railroad engineers and also by 7 Mile Beach Company was a tremendous tide and ebb flow that was created at Townsend's Inlet. And this is not counting the powerful nor'easter storms that they would often get, let alone just not even hurricanes. You can see from this slide, during the first approximately 48 months of train service, the bridge was out of commission for almost 32 months. So the first three or four spans were damaged by nor'easters or strong tidal surges. So after almost 4 years, and finally listening to the locals on the island on how this dilemma could be alleviated, West Jersey Railroad engineers constructed what would be referred to as the horseshoe bridge. The horseshoe being in this part of the bridge. This is coming out of Avalon, about 6th Street, west of 6th Street, going west into Ingram's Thoroughfare, and then coming around into 88th Street in Sea Isle. The engineer's horseshoe solution trestle would be about 4,000 feet long, and they opened this on April of 1892. Now, in engineering the bridge this way, it was also constructed with cast iron pilings, about 12 inches wide and 70 feet in length. And they were made by the Phoenix Iron Company out of Philadelphia. Now, this would make for a stronger piling. Also, by creating this horseshoe bridge, going further out west, they spread the tidal flow coming in. This is where this tremendous tidal flow would destroy these bridges, often after just nor'easter storms. This would almost lessen the tidal flow or impact on this bridge by as much as 50%. So the idea worked, even though they would still have problems in the future. This bridge would last until the Depression in 1929 or 1930. Here's the first official station stop in Avalon, railroad station stop in Avalon. This was built by a gentleman by the name of ENOS Williams out of Delaware County, Pennsylvania. He was a very well-educated builder and designer. This station would eventually be moved to 11th Street, and this would have been around 1889. This would have what they call a siding running along the side here on the tracks to allow to park additional railroad cars for either freight from the railroad. This type of station building was normal in design in that it had both a passenger side, which would be passenger side ticket office, which would be right here, this side of the station, and the freight and storage side, which would be at the other end. And this would all be shared by a common roof. The center was for waiting passengers to keep them out of the elements. Pictured here is the West Jersey Railroad steam engine parked at Pyrmont Station in Avalon. Pyrmont, which I'll talk about in a few minutes. You can see the train siding, which is right here. These tracks, extra tracks here, marked by this arrow. On the side is where they would park extra cars from time to time. And the engineer would just uncouple the cars and park them there. Notice the size of the large wheels on the engine. This would be referred to as the driving wheels for you railroad buffs out there, which I'm sure you know. The diameter or the size of the wheel is important because that would determine the speed of the engine. And by looking at these wheels would be about 70 inches tall, as you can see from the size of the people standing on the train, which would enable this engine to do about close to 96 miles an hour at top speed. The wheels without the inner flange on the front were referred to as blind wheels, and these would be used to better navigate sharp turns. One of the initial requests and requirements dictated by the West Jersey Railroad was that 7 Mile Beach Company erect a hotel to accommodate the train passengers as they arrive on the island for overnight stays. It was the railroad's thinking that as long as Avalon promoted the town offering accommodations for their passengers, this would increase ridership on the railroad. I pictured here the inside of a worker's cabin, or crew shack as they referred to it, for the workmen, painters, and other mechanics that would be necessary to build these hotels that are going to be on hotels and homes on the island. This building was a typical, and this was built again by ENOS Williams, was a typical 16 by 28 feet. And it would accommodate probably about 30 workmen. This was located at around 7th and Dune. Another photo of a temporary shelter built for the workers. This would be from the other side for these carpenters and painters, and our makeshift bunks. Don't look really all that comfortable, but this is where they would stay. On January 28, 1888, Joseph Wells and Mr. Siddall, under a separate corporation, the Townsend's Inlet Hotel Company of 7 Mile Beach, boy, that's a mouthful, brought the group of investors to stake out the location of the first hotel in Avalon, which, from what I understand, was a bitterly cold day, and they actually staked the hotel out at night after they had dinner. The location was determined by the large sand dunes starting around 8th Street. The hotel was again to be built by ENOS Williams. He would win the contract, build the first hotel on the island for the grand total of $19,500. He would have the lumber barged over from Townsend's Inlet in February of 1888, because remember the bridge was out. Keep in mind the inlet was about 1,200 feet then. Today it's about 750 feet. So this was a rough trip with the strong tides. The hotel was completed by May of 1888 on the ocean beach east of First Avenue. 5 years later, this hotel will be moved back 400 feet to the northwest side of First Avenue due to the threat of storms and erosion. And it is told, I don't think it's folklore, that this was all done with the power of one horse. The hotel was considered one of the finest hotels on the East Coast. It would advertise all beds included braided wire spring mattresses. Even though it did not have private baths, it did have a toilet and bathrooms for men on the first floor and ones for the women on the second floor. It would also serve as the center for activity in the early years of Avalon. Often early religious worship services would be held there. This would be a recurring ad from the hotel placed on the Roundtable, the first local island newspaper, edited by then Reverend Charles Bond, who happened to be the brother-in-law of Joseph Wells. As you can see, the rate for the day was $2.50, which we believe included meals. This photo of Avalon would be at the turn of the century. The famous tower is missing, and not sure to this day as to whether or not this was caused by a fire or a major storm. The sidewalks, also wooden, and planks laid to enable pedestrians to cross the street without getting muddy. Here we have a front page copy of the Roundtable of Avalon. The publication was started in July of 1890, again by Charles Bond. I threw this slide and blew up this one section because I found it somewhat humorous. Just an enlarged sentence, as it says here, secure your rooms at once, as the hotels are not very large, and when the last key goes off the board, there may be weeping and gnashing of teeth. The next hotel to be erected on the island would be the Pyrmont Hotel, built by George Rummel and the Avalon Beach Improvement Company, between 33rd and 34th Street. Its rooms were also rated at $2.50 a day, apparently to compete with the Hotel Avalon. A two-story pavilion and bathhouses would be constructed off to the right of the hotel. Construction started on May 1st, 1889, and believe it or not, they were open for business by mid-July. This is an ad that also appeared in the Roundtable publication, and with the same rate as the Hotel Avalon at $2.50 a day. This is an early photo of the construction of the Pyrmont Hotel that I found interesting. As you see, notice the hotel, I guess to do better than the Hotel Avalon, they put two towers instead of one. The builder here was Francis K. Duke. A rear view of the Pyrmont Hotel during construction. View is from the south corner of 34th Street and First Avenue. This is a photo of the Pyrmont Hotel, some of the guests enjoying an afternoon on the side porch of the hotel along 34th Street. The gentleman with the beard, indicated by the downward arrow, is Colonel Henry W. Sawyer, a war hero in the War of the Rebellion and manager of the hotel at the time. Here we have a group of ladies enjoying conversation from what looks like to be a wonderful weather on the porch of the Pyrmont Pavilion. Notice the straw in the front of them, laid on the sand to help prevent getting sand in their shoes. The Beach Pavilion, part of the Hotel Pyrmont complex, with a large group of visitors. To the left and adjoining the pavilion are the bathhouses. These would be the bathhouses here. These sat on the west corner of 33rd Street. Sadly, both structures will be totally destroyed due to the storm of September 1889. This is a photo of the Leeming House, another hotel at the very north end of the island. Notice the railing in the foreground is actually connected to the railroad platform, which would be over here to the right. and it was built by George Rummel for a railroad flag stop. A flag stop was just not more, a train would stop if a red flag was out, put into a holder at the end of the railway there, at the end of the railing. This Leeming House was also the first hotel in Avalon to acquire a license to serve liquor. This was one of the first laws and amendments passed by the council, which George Rummel was a council member. Another closer view of the Leeming House Hotel with staff members on the front porch. It was so named for the small hamlet of Leeming, which was nestled on the banks of the Townsend's Inlet. There was a larger hotel built by George Cates in 1891 for George Rummel, but that burnt down in 1900. It was then rebuilt by Charles and Nellie Hagan on the northwest side of 6th Avenue between 1st and 2nd Street. Here we have George and Mary Rummel's home on 32nd Street. It was later given to their son decades later and would become the Loray Hotel. It would also serve as the Pyrmont post office and eventually would burn down. Room rates were $1, $1.50, and $2 per day. They also served hot meals. And the other thing was, it was open all year. It also served as a makeshift medical facility in the 1930s, where in the summer months, besides seeing patients, the doctor would perform minor surgical procedures. There's a local ad from the Loray Hotel, which I thought was interesting. It's a rest cure for the nervous people. Convalescents recuperate very quickly at this resort. The original Hotel Princeton at 21st Street and 2nd Avenue, built in 1910. Sadly, this will burn down on New Year's Eve in 1916. The newly built Princeton, built in the late 1920s. The Puritan Hotel, located on 20th Street and built around 1917, most likely by Charles Hall, a builder and developer on the island. He was also an earlier owner, but he would lose it to bankruptcy in 1921. It was then operated by a Mabel Brown, who lost it in 1928 to the sheriff. A buyer then operated it under the name of the Puritan Hotel. It was then lost to the borough while in receivership during the Depression. It will eventually, though, become the Whitebriar that we know today. The Sherwood Hotel, after a while changed to apartments and rooms, later to become the now Helen Diller Home for the Blind. The Pyrmont Development was all those streets from 25th to 42nd Street west of the beach. Here they're pictured, these are the directors of the Avalon Beach Improvement Company, and this being George Rummel right here, who would be the president and entrepreneur. In this picture, he was 46 years old. He would start the Pyrmont Development section of the island. He negotiated with Joseph Wells in July of 1888 for approximately 3,000 lots. They had agreed on the 17-block westward from the boulevard, but excluding the beach, for $75,000. This slide shows a copy of the map, the layout of the streets for the Pyrmont section that Avalon Beach Improvement Company would present or file with the county. This is pretty much the same slide, only this slide is showing the gray areas of waterways that would also needed to be filled in by the tearing down of dunes and filling in the waterways. This photo gives you a good idea, if you look to the right, of the size of these dunes back then. And these, again, as I said, would run north to the south of the island. Judging by the idle wheelbarrows pictured here at the time of the day and the shadows of the trees, would guess that the crew had left for the day. The gentleman in the photo here, most likely with his wife, was employed by George Rummel to establish the correct specification on removal of dune material. This here is a photo of the Pyrmont Railroad station shortly after its construction by ENOS Williams in 1899. At this time, the tracks only went as far as 35th Street. Pyrmont would be the third station stop on the island, between 31st and 35th Street, with the station at 33rd Street. The Pyrmont Station was so named because of the Pyrmont Hotel and distinguished itself from the Avalon Station. The entire Rummel development would also be called Pyrmont. But let's not forget some of the important people on the island, like the bathing masters. Here we have a photo of the first two lifeguards, or as they were called then, bathing masters. Howard High, which is the gentleman here on the left, and then Walter Smith. This would have been around 1906. These two gentlemen also would serve, when they weren't doing bathing masters during the day, as policemen at night. And all this for about $2 a day. This would be the first lifeboat and did not make its presence until 1914. This would be the last year for both Walter Smith and Howard High as bathing masters or lifeguards. This is the Pyrmont Wharf, located at the end of 25th Street at Graven's Thoroughfare, and this is about 1890. George Rummel would often provide sailboat rides to patrons of his hotel. Sadly, though, this hotel will burn down in February of 1896. Now I'm going to show you some of the early Avalon homes. The following slides are just a sample of some of the beautiful Victorian-style architecture homes to be constructed on the island. At the request of Joseph Wells, one of the first of 8 homes built by Samuel McElwain for 7 Mile Beach Company, of a total agreed 16 homes, was located on 6th Street. Again, this would burn down in 1889. A lot of the designs for these homes would copy Victorian architecture copied from the 1876 Centennial Exposition. This house was designed by S.D. Button for Joseph Wells. It was constructed by ENOS Williams and was located on the southwest side of 8th Street. The houses to either side of Wells' house were also 2 of the original 16 homes, both Button and McElwain homes. This home sits on the corner of 33rd Street and 1st Avenue and was the property of Mr. J.F. Reinhart, a director with the Avalon Beach Improvement Company. Thankfully, it still exists today and is well preserved. Located now on the west corner of 33rd Street and 1st Avenue, this home was built and completed by John Berner in September of 1890 for a Carrie Ridley. This is the original Avalon Post Office on the west corner of 6th Street and 2nd Avenue. George W. Smith was the first postmaster and also an excellent house painter. He would operate the house along with his wife Esther. He was contracted to paint the Hotel Avalon also. This photo is from 1888. Here is that same, believe it or not, in the cruise shack that I showed you earlier pictures of the interior. This is with different additions done by ENOS Williams at the request of a Mary Lambert who was a resident on the island. This house would stay standing, believe it or not, until 2005 when it was demolished. Mary Lambert had bought 2 additional lots adjacent to this one where ENOS Williams would build her charming villa. Here is Mary Lambert's Marine Villa, also built, as I said, by ENOS Williams on the south corner of 7th Street. And this was built in 1889. This was also Avalon's first schoolhouse, and it was taught by, classes were taught by Mrs. Lambert's daughter, Minnie. Notice also the ENOS Williams cruise shack here on the right. That's the same cruise shack with the different additions. This is the original Avalon schoolhouse. Other than Mrs. Lambert's house on 7th Street and 2nd Avenue was on 13th Street, constructed by Leeming Miller and completed in the fall of 1893. Class was held on the first floor, and the second floor was used by the Borough Council as their council chambers. The building was owned by the Avalon School District. The arrangement continued until 1914 when a new school was built on 26th Street. The 13th Street building was then converted to the Avalon Municipal Building, where it operated for many years. What is the island without its churches? Early on, religious worship in Avalon was very important to the founding members and their families. One of the first non-denominational religious gatherings was actually held in a tent provided by Mrs. Wells, Joseph Wells' wife, and Colonel George W. Smith. But after a strong storm destroyed the tent, services were then to be held in the newly built Avalon Hotel. This is a photo of the Pyrmont Methodist Church located on First Avenue. The first church built on the island under the request of George Rummel, who wanted a place of worship for his Pyrmont residents. The building and lot were sold to the church for the church group for $900 in 1893. The building today is now a private home. This is a photo of the dedication ceremony and laying of the cornerstone on August 28, 1892 for the Avalon Presbyterian Church at 9th Street, now referred to as Wells Memorial, so named for the daughter of one of the founding members who drowned at the time of this photograph. And it was non-denominational, and members from different faiths would contribute to its construction. The gentleman here on your left of the photo with his distinctive beard is none other than George W. Smith, who would become the first postmaster on 7 Mile Beach, Avalon, at the request of Joseph Wells. The Wells Memorial Presbyterian Church, after construction, this would become the second place of worship and also completed in 1893. The African American Church, located at 17th and Dune. The pastor of the church was the Reverend Joel Cannon, who had a fish market and also was the town trash collector. They can only recall at the time about 7 black families being on the island. This is St. John's by the Sea Episcopal Church, established in 1914 on the west corner of 25th and Avalon. Here we have Sacred Heart Roman Catholic Church, or referred to as Maristella's, established in July of 1928 on the corner of 25th Street and First Avenue. Let's talk about early Avalon entertainment. The Avalon Casino. No, it's not a casino like you'd have in Atlantic City. A casino was just more or less a building where they would have social events, play cards, and just people would meet together. They would hold different types of meetings or whatever there. This is the Avalon Casino, located on 17th Street on the west side of the boardwalk. It was built in 1915 by Charles Hall after the Pyrmont Casino. The Marine Room was the ballroom on the second floor and had not one but 2 large fireplaces that overlooked the ocean. It also had an overhanging balcony that surrounded the room. It had a stage at one end and a screen for movies at the other end. It also included a roller skating rink, a basketball court, billiards. You could also play skee ball. It had it all. There was a luncheonette with a soda fountain and 3 apartments, even a barber shop. It was self-sufficient in that it had its own generating plant. Unfortunately, though, it had a short life. Due to absentee ownership and vandalism in storms, it was condemned by the then mayor, Bergner, and torn down in 1928. Here's another view of the Avalon Casino from the boardwalk looking north. This is a photo of the annual bell mask held in the casino. This photo shows those attending in August of 1917. The gentleman you see here in the white business suit, standing by himself in the front, is Charles Hall, founder of and builder of the casino. This is a view looking north from around 30th Street. The Avalon Pier is on the right, while the Pyrmont Casino is on the left. It was built in 1914 by the Avalon Amusement Company. 3 gentlemen by the name of Charles Johnson, Edward Becker, and Edmund how the Pyrmont Casino stood for almost 90 years before being condemned and demolished in 2001. This was Avalon's first casino, which housed a large ballroom for dances and social events. The Avalon Pier, one of the borough's last big projects, with plans started in 1928 before the Depression in 1929. It was referred to also as the Municipal Pier. It quickly also became the home of the Avalon Movie Theater. This would become a true social attraction and meeting place for many years to come. Dances would be held on the second floor. The annual end of the season lifeguard ball would be held here. It also had a fishing pier located at the rear of the building, but that sadly would only last a few years due to a severe storm in 1933. It had a life of just about 50 years and was torn down in 1979. This is the fishing pier located at the rear end of the Avalon Pier. This is the dedication of the Avalon Pier on 29th Street on August the 8th, 1929. It was dedicated then by Governor Larson of New Jersey and the Avalon Mayor Bergner. I just want to bring to your attention, notice the number of cars parked here on the street. The automobile was now making its way onto the island. Never too soon. Here's a picture of the Avalon's first mainland drive road. The Avalon's new swing bridge, and this was built in 1913. Only this bridge pivoted in the center, right here, to open for boats and marine vessels. This bridge would serve Avalon until 1965. This would also be the new drive road via 21st Street into Avalon from the mainland. It's also referred to as the Bill Curry Bridge, who was the operator of opening and closing the bridge. Now I'm going to turn to some early Avalon businesses. The first general store in Avalon, built by Marie Louise Van Thyn out of Philadelphia in 1911. She also built the first one in Stone Harbor. The Avalon store was on the southwest corner of 22nd Street and 2nd Avenue. It would eventually become Avalon Carpet and Tile. This is a copy of a postcard of the Van Line store later on, looking south on 2nd Avenue. This photo is a little bit dark, but this is the Pioneer Market, where you could purchase butter, eggs, milk, and even coal. They were located at 29th Street and 2nd Avenue and owned and operated by Gilbert Smith along with his wife. They would also at one time own and operate the Avalon Hotel with the old homestead at 12th Street and Dune Drive. He was a member of Avalon's first borough council in April of 1892 and would also serve as mayor for 25 years. Here's the American store, location at 2108 Dune Drive, and this photo would be circulated around 1930. Opened and operated by two brothers out of Philadelphia. Now the location of Circle Pizza. The Esso Station, circulation 1934. Owned and operated by Walter Smith on the east corner of 21st Street and 3rd Avenue. At this time, he was retired as the postmaster of Avalon and would operate the station until his death in 1941. After his death, it was operated by his daughter Frances and then his son George and daughter-in-law Dee Phillips. So we should all realize that the railroad did have a major role in the creation of this beautiful summer resort island known to us as Avalon that we all enjoy today. The railroad brought many investors and future year-round residents to the island early on. Looking at these old photos of those visitors and future property owners entering the island from the train in the background, we can almost feel their excitement and how they enjoyed arriving in Avalon. During the summer months, as many as 24 trains, some with up to 15 to 17 cars, would arrive, bringing 4,000 to 5,000 or more visitors to the island. Often these trains would be pulled by 2 or 3 engines. A photo of an excursion train in the early 1920s with passengers exiting on the west side of Dune Drive. Passengers boarding a train on their way back to Philadelphia. Again, this would be circa 1920s. Notice the automobile and the drive road, which is now Dune Drive. This being the last railroad station to be constructed in 1926. The Avalon Station at 21st Street and 2nd Avenue, as both previous stations, the one at 11th Street and the Pyrmont Station, were closed and consolidated into just the one station. This station, this station in this photo sits at 19th Street and 2nd Avenue. Just 2 years later, West Jersey Railroad will discontinue its winter train schedule. This building was later moved in the 60s to the Borough Yard at 14th Street, where it was demolished in 1992. By 1933, West Jersey Railroad, that has now merged with Reading Railroad, has decided to discontinue all passenger service to Avalon, although they would continue to provide service to both CI and Wildwood. One of the reasons is the cost to operate the train trestle and to man the train station in Avalon was in upwards of $35,000 a year at the time. So 1933 was not a good year for Avalon. With a recession going on and Avalon with large bills to pay, bond issues coming due, normal operating expenses that would not go away, and tax collections falling below 50%, the borough was in a tough financial times. But thanks to the perseverance and good counsel and borough management over the coming years, Avalon will bounce back stronger than ever. With the merger of West Jersey Railroad and Seashore Railroad to form the Reading Railroad and Seashore Line, train service to Avalon was no longer. If you traveled by train, you would terminate your trip in Cape May Courthouse, where you would then complete your trip to Avalon by a bus. Total trip would take a little more than about 2 hours at a cost of a little more than $3. That's it for the slides for this video, and I hope you all enjoyed it for the first 50 years of Avalon. I want to thank you from the Avalon History Center, and also a big thanks goes out to Mr. Robert Penrose Sr., who without his book on Avalon, which we sell at the History Center in the Historical Society's gift shop, would not have been possible. Thanks to him and the photos that he has provided so that I could provide this to you. Thank you very much.